We have to become the person we are meant to be first, to live the life we are destined to live. We all encounter challenges, obstacles, and even dark times on that journey, but we are not alone. This podcast will give all seekers hope and understanding that others have walked that path before us. My guests will share how they overcame the challenges and what helped them turn the corner. Listening to their inspiring stories, get motivated and take action to transform into that amazing person that you really are. Your voice needs to be heard and your message must be shared. My name is Sabine Quenberg and I am your host. I'm glad that you're here to listen to my podcast where you can discover how to become the more incredible version of yourself. Are you ready? Let's get on this journey together. In this podcast episode, I will share with you the highlights of my podcast's interviews that I had this year. The very first show was released on June 8th of 2022, and that was with Dr. Ron, and it was a great start. And all others that came afterwards were just as wonderful and so different. Each episode and each guest is just marvelous and different, but all have one thing in common. They share how they overcame a dark time in their life, how they overcame the adversity that they faced, but came out on the other side as their next greater self. And this is what this podcast is all about. We are not alone. We can overcome anything in our lives and become stronger and better than before. So without any further ado, I hope you enjoy these highlights, and let's start with our first one. Welcome, Dr. Ron. I am grateful and honored to have you as my first guest on this show. And it seems like the perfect match because my podcast is about transformation and becoming the great potential that we are. And with your expertise and experience as a transformation guide, I know our listeners are in it for a treat. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
We have to accept ourselves of who we are and what you mentioned earlier through that dark time in your life. Maybe some of the listeners today, they're struggling right now, have to go through a very dark period or feeling inadequate, not enough. What is your advice that you would give someone? What was it that helped you? You shared with us you got into quietness. Is there anything else besides, of course, I would always recommend find somebody like Dr. Ron if you really would like some guidance here. But is there something that someone could do right now to overcome that?
Well, I think you have to appreciate that all the challenges in our life are created in relationship to other people. And that really is your indicator that to resolving those challenges needs to be done in relationship to other people also. And so lots of times somebody like me is really that other person. Then they do more group work and then they expand it into their life and into their more significant relationships. But the healing, that marriage to me is not coming together and having eternal bliss. It's finding somebody who's willing to stand in the fire and unpack the bags together and really, heal all of that past together.
I have a very special guest with me, Jacquelynn Peterson. How are you, Jacquelynn?
I'm well, thank you, Sabine. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Today, you are this independent, strong woman who is coaching others. But how did it start out for you to become that independent woman?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really a great question because to be honest with you, if you were to ask me, do I see myself living the life that I'm living today and doing the work that I'm doing today, perhaps like 20 or 30 years ago, I would say absolutely not, right? Because I actually started out listening and just kind of abdicating my happiness into the hands of my parents. And my first marriage was somebody that they kind of half prearranged with a family that they knew. And the guy had an MBA degree, which was like a huge thing, right? It's like, oh, well, he has an MBA degree, so he must, yeah, he has good education, he can take care of you, and all of that. And at that point in my life, I was like 23 or so. And I remember my stepmom saying, you know, hey, did you know that when you're back in Vietnam at this age, if you're not married yet, you'd be considered an old hag. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm only 23, right? But it's like she didn't, I don't think she meant that maliciously. I think it's just because that's just what she knew, right? But me, I internalized it. I'm like, oh my gosh, so I guess I am. I guess I am an old hag. I guess I am worthless. Like I guess I wouldn't find any happiness unless my parents arranged it for me. And so I just blindly accepted. And so my first marriage was somebody that they kind of have set up for me. And but that marriage lasts like a little over a year. And I was absolutely miserable. Like, absolutely miserable. I could not, I didn't even have a say or a voice in anything, right? I was it was expected like that after I get married that I would move in and live with my in-laws family. I'm like, but this is not what I wanted. And I remember bringing that up to my ex-in-law at one point, and I remember my ex father-in-law, he adamantly told me, he's like, you guys will move out and have your own life when I tell you you can move out and have your own life. And I'm just like, what the heck did I just get myself into? The problem is a lot of us, when we're in that situation, it's the shock, right? But then we start to second doubt, or second guess ourselves, and then we rely on other people to tell us, say, hey, is what I'm feeling right or not? And then in that case, it was my family and my stepmom. She said, well, maybe it's because that's just how the Vietnamese culture is. Like, you've just been really spoiled with us, right? So it's a shock to you, but that's just how the Vietnamese culture is. And so I just didn't know any better. I'm just like, oh, okay, I guess I've been too spoiled. Maybe I this is just the way that things are, right? But then one thing led to another, and then at the very end, it was when I suspected that my ex-husband was uh, having a phone conversation with my best friend in the middle of the night and waking me up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and saying, hey, your best friend's in trouble, she really needs you, you need to call her, and blah blah blah. And I was like, but wait a second, if my best friend was in trouble, wouldn't I be the first point of contact? Like, what is she doing talking to you at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, right? And so I just had this intuition. Something was like, one, I don't have a voice or say in anything. I've been putting up with things for over a year, and now I have to suspect that my husband is not faithful. I'm like, is this the kind of life that I'm destined to live for the rest of my life? And that was when I said, enough is enough.
Laura Mak Quist. Before I introduce you to her, let me give you just a quick background of who she is. She was a former professional athlete turned into a lifestyle and fitness yoga coach. In the midst of all of this, you were diagnosed with Hashimoto's, an immune disease. So how did that work out with trying to get pregnant again, and how did it make you feel? How was your health affected by that, and what did you do?
Since being diagnosed with Hashimoto's, it was something that I knew there was something going on with my body. I knew I was in this fog. I was starting to get more sleep, so that didn't make sense. I was starting to feel more like myself for the first 2 hours in the morning, but then by 10:30, I was like, whoa, it was almost like the fog rolls in, or my feet felt like they had cinder blocks on them. It was really a strange feeling. And so I absolutely knew something was completely off. And so after meeting with the endocrinologist, doing all the testing and stuff, he's like, well, you definitely have Hashimoto's, and it's an autoimmune disease where your body attacks its own thyroid, so you can't produce the hormones that you need, and your thyroid needs to be in balance to get pregnant. And so to do that, we ended up, the best program for me was to use Synthroid to help that get back in balance. And then during that time, I just knew that wasn't going to be my normal. So I had to start doing some more research in on that to see what other ways can I actually help myself, because this is something I can actually have a little bit more input on. And so I did more research on the types of foods I should include in my body, the types of foods I should eliminate or reduce. And I did extra things like acupuncture was a really big thing that helped a lot. I changed the intensity of my workout. I increased my walking, and not the intensity of the walking, but just making it more part of a daily routine, whereas before it wasn't, because I did a lot of other things. And so now that I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be part of my routine because this is better for what my body needs. Knowing as a trainer, you work with a client and they progress in different phases or different chapters. And so I had to put my skills to myself, knowing that this is the chapter that I'm in right now. And what I'm training for is like, it's not the Olympics, it's the big baby birthing, And so it was kind of my Olympics, my own version of the Olympics coming up. And so I had to do the things for that preparation and that type of training. And so once I figured out these things, it was able to, along with the medication at that time, all of those things really helped to keep it in balance. And so we were able to try again. And then we finally got pregnant with
Yes.
a healthy baby. And now we have two bouncing boys.
Well, congratulations. And I know your boys are so precious, and I'm so glad that you got it. But it also shows me, if you have that vision, that dream, and you want to have the family, that you can make it happen. And even in the midst of being diagnosed with this autoimmune disease, that you took charge of your life. And if our listeners can get anything out of it, is we cannot do anything about the circumstances that we are faced with, but we can always do something how we respond to those. And that's what makes the difference between people either staying stuck or staying in that fog, or just feeling sorry for themselves, or saying, hey, I'm gonna fight this, I'm move forward, and whatever it takes, I still live. I still want to pursue my passions, my dreams, and live the life that I imagine. Today, you're listening to a conversation that I had with my very good friend, Dana Agnellini.
2005 was a pivotal year for me. It was the best that life had to offer and the worst all at the same time. And as you were speaking, I never thought of it this way before, but I think of, let's say a crab, or what are those, horseshoe crabs, I think, that they change shells?
Yes.
They have to let go of their old shell to either find one that fits them properly now, or to grow a new one. But the letting go process is just as important as the next step. So I was in this career that was very lucrative with a big, international company, and was doing very well. But at the same time, I attracted to me a new boss that for some reason or another, just had a problem with me and was trying to work me out of the organization. So that was part of the shell being relieved. And at the same time, my marriage was disintegrating. I tried to ignore it. We tried for almost 20 years because I was never planning on divorcing. I had 3 kids. It just wasn't in my plans. I made myself a promise. I made my family a promise. But the universe knew better. Mm-hmm. The universe knew it was time to let that shell go. Mm. And at the same time, I was getting coaching, spiritual coaching, and I was advised to do Radical Forgiveness. Colin Tipping. It was a great book, and it turns out in that year he was still doing his own workshop. So I attended the workshop in Atlanta, and that was like Roto-Rooter for the soul. I mean, I promise you, we were in a group of about 6 people, and there was nothing left on the table. It was just all out there. And yet I came home 1,000 pounds lighter and just a new person with a new vision. So in that year, I let the marriage go. I did eventually get let go from the company. Mm-hmm. And I started recording. I did Radical Forgiveness. It all happened in the same time. Now, just a short fast forward, it was only 6 weeks later that I had a better job. Mm-hmm. And I had a severance package from the old job, which all went in the bank.
Yeah.
So was that a curse or a blessing?
Yeah.
It was a blessing.
Today, I have the pleasure to interview Rainer Oleak, also known as Ole, who has the Tonscheune Berlin, Germany. Yes, we have an international guest. He is a musician, a composer. He wrote many film and TV music. And we actually go back quite a bit. We met each other over 30 years ago and have been in touch ever since. And today I want to talk about a very special transition and becoming. Usually we always talk about that with our personal lives, but today I want to go one step further and actually talk about the transition and the becoming of a united Germany. Let me give you just a little bit of a history background. Germany used to be 2 countries, East Germany and West Germany, and that still came from the aftermath of the Second World War. And eventually, it came to a point where the people had enough of that who lived in East Germany. We were starting to get united. Obviously, there was a lot of pain involved, after the euphoric yay. My question to you is, in that whole process, for you as a musician, as a composer, did it give you more opportunity? How did that all had an impact on your personal life?
First of all, I want to point out 2 little things. The first thing, the big changes in life are not as big in the moment you feel them, because afterwards, when you look back, it's a big change. I remember when the wall came down, I was in my bed. I got a telephone call at 4 o'clock in the morning from a friend of mine, and he told me, "Oh, listen, the wall breaks down." And I say, "Yes, thank you. Hang up the phone and sleep on." So early at 8 or 9, I switch on the TV, and I figure out, oh, the wall is down. And so in my personal life, it was a kind of a shock, but it was not so important in the moment. We figure out, okay, it takes a couple of time, a week or a days. I remember on the first day when the wall was open, I go in a S-Bahn and go to West Berlin, take a round, and there were so many people that after half an hour, I was so pressed that I go back home. So this was a thing. And the second thing, what I want to point out, a funny thing is, nobody can imagine, because I think it's only one time in the history and in the world that you have a kind of an emigration in your own country, because all the countries changed but the trees are the same. My flat are the same. My car was the same. But everything else are changing because I wake up in another country with all the bureaucracy totally different. The health system totally different. Everything was totally different except the trees in front of my house. So this was a funny thing I want to always point out. Try to imagine you go in an emigration, but you don't leave your bed.
Jessica Peterson, you are a very positive person. And what were like one or two of the most positive moments of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very positive person. Was it always easy? No, because I did not grow up in a positive environment. I had to really invest in personal development and training, and really had to work hard at that and shift. And when you do shift that, I believe manifesting starts taking place. Law of attraction, really big changes start happening in your life.
Jenny Townsend.
At the end of my first year, I finally got everything under one roof. All my teachers were under one roof. We were rocking, we were rolling. I started hiring more people, and I made a couple bad hires, which resulted in me having to work more hours, more time, and we weren't really making any money, which was stressful for me as I am a goal-oriented person. It was stressful for my husband because he's like, you're working all these hours and you're not paying yourself. And my response to him was, I don't need to be paid. I love what I'm doing. The fact that I get to work my passion every single day and change people's lives was payment enough for me. He never really connected with the mission of my company, which is one of the reasons why we ended up where we were. He always supported me in my dream, but he became very resentful, the fact that I wasn't making money and the fact that I was living my dream when he was working a miserable job. So all these different variables led to a massive disaster. And I called. He didn't answer. Emergency. And that's where I discovered that my husband was having an affair with one of his coworkers, a woman that I had met previously 3 years prior at their office. And when I went to his office to see him, she was instantly in his room flirting with him in front of me. And at that point in my life, I wanted to say, stay away from my husband, but I didn't want to embarrass him or her. And so February 8th of 2018 will always be in my head. And that was the day that I discovered my husband was having an affair with a coworker. I was hurt, and I did know that I wanted to not lose my husband because I had loved my husband for so long. And I really do feel like we were soulmates. So at that point, it was just, there's so many different emotions. I don't even know if I can explain it. You go from angry to crying. Luckily, I had just hired someone in January to work for my company. And that person, if I would have been in my company full time, that person would not have worked out. So it's really great that I was able to step out of my company. They were able to take my company to the next level. There's a lot of benefits and a lot of really great things that came out of that journey. It's sad, and it's, like I said, it's still part of our life. It will always be part of our life. But it's not my husband's character. My husband is a really great guy. He's really loyal. He's loving. He's committed. I mean, it's definitely not my husband's character. So I was able to find forgiveness through a variety of things that I did along the recovery journey, but it was definitely hard.
I welcome Paul Henszel.
So in the beginning of 2010, I was working as a supervisor in a sawmill. Now I had to unjam a giant log that got stuck against a giant steel beam. Now these logs that we were cutting are called cants. They're extremely heavy, and each piece weighs about 1,000 pounds. Now we had to manually unjam this log before we could, resume production. So I had to crawl into a very tight, confined space. And when we freed this piece, the chains started while I was still in the machine, and I was being crushed alive by 12,000 pounds of wood. I could hear my body cracking, gurgling, and crunching. It literally felt like my head was going to explode. There was so much pressure. And I thought to myself, if this doesn't stop, I'm going to die. I then blacked out. Now, I was not breathing and without oxygen for about 12 minutes. Now, my coworkers had to perform amazing feats of strength just to rescue me in that time limit. When I was freed, everyone thought I was dead. They were just about to perform CPR, and miraculously, I started breathing. But of course, the pain was overwhelming. Now, I was rushed to the hospital. The ambulance ride was horrific because I could feel every bump and vibration in my spine. Now, the ambulance ride was also a little chaotic because they could not find a consistent pulse. So the paramedics were scrambling, trying to figure out what was going on. Now, of course, I was confused. I had no idea what was happening because I thought I just survived this horrific accident. When I got to the hospital, more confusion and panic. I couldn't see what was going on really because I had lost my glasses in the accident. There were a lot of doctors rushing around, and I asked what's going on, what's wrong with me. And they said, you have an anoxic brain injury. Your lung is punctured and collapsed. You have multiple broken ribs and bones. We're not even sure about your spine until we look at that, but we're mainly concerned about your organs. Now, that's the part I was confused about. I had no idea my organs were failing, and that's what they were concerned about, not all my other injuries. Now, I was extremely healthy person. I hadn't even broken a bone up to that point, or rarely gotten sick, so I didn't understand all that was happening and what apparently like crush syndrome and that produces sepsis in your body, which goes through everything, which, you know, your organs can't function properly, so they start shutting down. But I had no idea about that at that time. So I knew something had to change when I was in the hospital with all the confusion and panic, how I was really starting to feel just heavy. And again, something had to change. And that's when I was touched by an angel. And that angel was my wife.
I hope you enjoyed these excerpts. And of course, you can listen to the entire interviews on my blog page or in your app store. 2023 is just around the corner. And if you're like me, you are probably thinking, how can I make next year better than the year before? And if this is the case, I invite you to take part of my Freedom Lifestyle Challenge. Because at the end, we must grow. We need to become the person that we are meant to be so we can live the life we are destined to live. I have the application link and the information in the show notes, and I invite you to partake in my next Freedom Lifestyle Challenge. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me, and we can make next year the best year ever together. I appreciate your support and downloading these episodes and sharing it and writing a review. And I look forward seeing you again in 2023. This is Sabine Quenberg, your host, and I wish you a very happy and healthy 2023.